3 years after the violent crime, 2 of the paintings are still missing. The Rembrandt self-portrait and Young Parisian by Renoir. Value, approximately $20 million. The brains behind this heist was a man we'll call Sven. Sven serving a 6-year sentence in the Hall prison outside Stockholm.
I don't want to glorify any crimes, not even this one, but for me personally it was interesting and very, you can actually say fun. The motive is very simple, it's all about money.
So how did the fun-loving criminals manage to pull off this heist? How was it planned? And most important, why is Sven now behind bars?
Op het eind van het jaar brengt Discovery je het beste van 2003. Reis mee terug in de tijd. Kom oog in oog met je verre voorouders. Ga de confrontatie met je angsten aan. En laat je inspireren door het wonder van de techniek. Wat je passie ook is, waar je interesse ook ligt. Er is altijd een stuk van Discovery dat bij jou past. Voor het beste op het gebied van de documentaire mag je dit niet missen. Ultimate Discovery begint maandag 23 december.
Al is uw tandenborstel elektrisch, dat wil nog niet zeggen dat hij werkt als een Sonicare. De nieuwe Sonicare van Philips heeft gepatenteerde
$1 million. At a press conference, a clearly distressed museum director described the audacious theft and the exceptional works that had been stolen. Back to the present. The brains behind this spectacular heist was a man we'll call Sven. Sven was convicted for conspiring to rob the museum and taking part in the robbery itself. He claims he was only part of the conspiracy. Sven didn't want to be recognized on television, but he was willing to talk about how he planned his audacious robbery.
The last 4 years before the robbery, I was in prison. And in prison, you often discuss crime and money, because we're criminals. And I came aware of that mostly everything that's worth anything can be sold. And one of my hobbies is to go to different museums because I really like art. And I was looking at these valuable paintings. I realized that these valuable paintings must be someone who wants to buy them just as well as anything else.
This is a wall where this very small self-portrait by Rembrandt was hanging when it was stolen. And the small size of it, of course, makes it easy to handle for a thief.
Sven, or one of his partners, cased the museum to criminalize a warehouse of small, valuable objects. First, they decided which paintings to target. The rest was a question of careful planning.
If you're going to do a robbery, whether it's a museum or a bank, you have to know the location of the area. And you want to get inside the building fast, and you want to get out of there fast.
Sven and his partners met a number of times. The operation, which would ultimately involve 12 or 13 people, hinged on timing and organization. He looks back on this phase with pleasure.
During the planning, you always feel excited. And even if you have a conscience that says maybe it's not right to steal and do a robbery, you put that aside because you have decided that you're going to do this.
Initially, the men considered copying methods already tried and tested in Sweden in 1993, when art thieves sawed their way through the roof of Stockholm's modern museum.
Yeah, of course you can steal it. You can do this classic to go through the roof and stuff, but it's already been made in Sweden. So we thought that we should try something new.
New and ingenious, as the police would find out. Detective Chief Inspector Magnus Oswald of the Stockholm Serious Crime Unit was on the investigation from the start.
It was actually quite well planned. But a lot of criminal actions today is very well planned.
The gang finally hit on approaching their target by boat. The museum's by a quayside, so getting in and out quickly would be a piece of cake, with no chance of getting stuck in rush hour traffic. The burning cars completely obstructed police access.
You can see the National Museum. This is the place where the robbers had their boat who they escaped with. And this is the two places where they stuck the cars in fire.
Time's essential for a smooth robbery. Setting the cars on fire brought the gang at least 5 extra minutes, precious minutes. When the police finally arrived, they were met with another surprise.
So this is a picture of, I think it was at least 50 of them who they spread out on the streets. So the police car couldn't come into the street where the National Museum was.
Sven's preparations were watertight. Automatic weapons took care of the rest.
The guards in the museum were at every floor and even in the stairs. But if a man with a hood and dark clothes come running against you with something that looks like a gun, and then he shouts at you to get away, they get away.
No matter how sophisticated your museum's security is, there's little anyone can do to anticipate a hold-up like this. Ole Granath is the former head of Sweden's National Art Museums.
No, I don't think you can protect yourself if people walk in with heavy machine guns in a museum. That's it. You can just lie down on the floor and hope that nothing happens to anybody present.
The result was one of the most remarkable robberies ever staged in a European museum. Part of a new trend in art crime, heists in broad daylight by determined criminals not afraid to use violence. The Stockholm thieves left the museum with $30 million worth of art and made their getaway by speedboat. It was so nearly the perfect crime.
What went wrong was that we had stolen a boat, but it was something was wrong with the engine, so it didn't go as we wanted. So we had to buy a boat because the time was running out.
This is a picture of the boat who they escaped with. One of the biggest mistakes was actually that they buy this boat 2 days before, and they left this phone number.
The boat and the phone number were the first breakthroughs for the police. Calls carelessly made from a phone box to various mobile phones led them to suspected members of the gang. Within a few days, the police had enough evidence and were given warrants to search a number of apartments in and around Stockholm. They soon came across the name of mastermind Sven. He was arrested less than a fortnight after the robbery.
The 3rd of January, I got home from Gothenburg to Stockholm. I went down to the subway, was going to catch a train, and then 5 or 6 policemen came running towards me with drawn weapons and told me to lay down.
This is the bag who was carried by Sven when he was arrested in the underground, the 3rd of January. And you can see a little envelope, and in this envelope we found these 6 Polaroid photos of the stolen arts of Auguste Renoir. It's photo with a daily newspaper. With these photos we can be sure that he was involved with this case actually. So it was quite a good evidence.
With Sven safely in jail, whoever had the paintings at this point needed to dispose of them. With no luck passing them on in the criminal underworld, the thieves tried selling them back to the Stockholm Museum for a ransom. But like many other art institutions, the National Museum in Stockholm has a policy of never negotiating with art thieves. Most national collections are uninsured and wouldn't be able to afford to meet the demands, even if they wanted to. A few months later, the art nappers had another go at flogging a painting. They spread the word that Renoir's Conversation was for sale. A buyer arranged to meet them in a Stockholm cafe. Unfortunately for the crooks, the prospective buyer was an undercover policeman who was soon convinced that the painting they showed him was the genuine article. The trap was sprung and the crooks were immediately apprehended. Detective Chief Inspector Magnus Oswald, who set up the sting operation, was delighted.
This is the photo when we get one of the paintings, the Conversation of Renoir, with the undercover thing. So this is when we opened the package.
One masterpiece down, 2 to go. But nobody on the right side of the law has the faintest idea where the other Renoir or the Rembrandt self-portrait are. Oleg Granaf knows too well how tricky it is to recover stolen art.
Stolen art is used as payment in the drug business, where there often is very big sums in a big party of drugs, and then they use these as a kind of payment. So they move around without actually showing up in the market.
From his prison cell, mastermind Sven claims he had nothing to do with selling the Renoir, and despite initially denying having any knowledge of the whereabouts of the other Renoir or the Rembrandt, Sven may be the only key to the recovery of the missing masterpieces, but he's not willing to help.
For me personally, I hope that the paintings does not get back to the museum. But if they will get back, I don't know.
Well, why don't you want them to go back?
Sure, if they pay me, I will give them to them. Why should I want to give it back otherwise? Can they give me back 3 years of my life? Sure, I give it back to them.
3 small paintings stolen from the Stockholm Museum were worth $30 million, and hot art's temperatures continue to soar.
The interesting thing about art theft is that we only hear about the high-profile cases. We very rarely get to hear about the lesser-known works which are not quite as sexy. You know, they haven't got Leonardo's name attached to them, or, you know, they haven't got Picasso's name attached to them. And I know several examples of museums where I found out by accident that a picture was missing because it had been stolen. But of course institutions don't want people to believe that it's as easy as it is, and therefore they don't publicise all the thefts that occur on their premises.
Here, though, are a few cases where grabbing the art has grabbed the headlines. The top 5 most dazzling heists of the last century. At number 5, The Scream by Edvard Munch, valued at $70 million. While most of Norway was watching the opening ceremony of the 1994 Winter Olympics, 2 thieves broke into an Oslo gallery and took Edvard Munch's most famous work. The thieves left a note reading, "Thanks for the bad security." Private detective Charles Hill ultimately recovered the masterpiece. At number 4, the heist of Turner's Shade and Darkness and Light and Colour, worth more than $30 million each. The masterpieces were stolen in 1994 while on loan to a German gallery. The 3 thieves and their driver were arrested in 1995, but the paintings weren't retrieved for another 6 years. Number 3, in 2001, Spanish billionaire Esther Koplowitz took a holiday she regrets to this day. While she was sunbathing, thieves stole 19 paintings worth $50 million from her private collection. The gang gained entry to her penthouse after leaving a security guard badly beaten. He later admitted the wounds were self-inflicted and he'd been paid off to let the crooks in. And at number 2, one of the biggest and easiest robberies ever took place in Boston in 1990. 2 crooks dressed as policemen knocked on the door of the Gardner Museum, saying they were responding to a disturbance call. The naive guards let them in and were promptly handcuffed and tied up. This gave the thieves 80 leisurely minutes to steal a dozen paintings worth at least $300 million by artists such as Vermeer, Degas and Rembrandt. At number 1, without doubt, the Mona Lisa. Value incalculable. The theft took place in 1911, the first great art heist of the 20th century. The police questioned the entire Paris art scene, including Pablo Picasso, who, of course, had nothing to do with the theft. The Louvre Museum in Paris, perhaps the greatest art collection in the world, including its most famous and valuable painting, the Mona Lisa. It was painted by Leonardo da Vinci around 1505, and each year 5 million people come to admire her enigmatic smile. It had been hanging in the Louvre for 200 years when it was stolen in 1911, one of the few art crimes with a romantic motive. But what makes the Mona Lisa so special?
Je pense que le tableau en lui-même est exceptionnel en tant qu'œuvre de peintre. Le phénomène qui l'a accompagné est aussi tout à fait exceptionnel, mais au fond il est à la hauteur. Et il est délirant.
On the 20th of August 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre. It spent the next 2 years under the bed of an Italian romantic. One Sunday night, Vincenzo Peruggia, an Italian immigrant who worked at the Louvre, sneaked into the museum with 2 accomplices and waited for the sun to rise. Robert Noah, author of The Man Who Stole the Mona Lisa, traced the thieves' footsteps.
There was nothing ingenious about the theft. It was incredibly simple. Your badge, your identification badge at the Louvre in those days was a white smock. If on cleaning day, which was Monday, you showed up in a white smock, nobody would ever think to question you. You belonged.
The thieves spent that Sunday night crowded together in a closet. The next day was cleaning day.
Okay, this is the closet that the 3 men went into and where they slept that night. And they came out into the Salon Carré, which at that point was where the Mona Lisa was hung. But they walked around in these white smocks and just waved and said hi to everybody, or however one says that in colloquial French. And they weren't noticed. They simply were not noticed.
There was no security to speak of at the Louvre in 1911. Homeless people could often be found sleeping in its galleries, and prostitutes spent time there in the hope of picking up wealthier clients. Peruggia hid the painting under his smock, and the thieves just walked out of the building. When the news of the robbery was made public, Parisians displayed an outpouring of public grief. It was as if a celebrity had died. Bizarrely, that summer of 1911, the Louvre experienced a surge of visitors who came to marvel at the empty space where the painting had hung.
There were headlines all over the world. The Louvre has them on files, and I have flipped through them, and I mean, they are just, the world was stunned. The world's most famous painting, which it was even then, is missing.
It's thought the theft was most probably commissioned by the notorious conman Val Fierno. He'd just ordered 6 forgeries of the Mona Lisa and was about to sell them to unscrupulous collectors in the US. To convince each of his buyers that their fake was real, the genuine Mona Lisa had to be stolen. While the French began a massive hunt for the painting, Val Fierno instructed the thief Peruggia to keep the real Mona Lisa concealed, while the conman duly sold his fakes.
He was a man who did what he was told, so he hid it under his bed. The Mona Lisa is under this guy's bed in this dingy apartment on the left bank in Paris. And it stayed there for 2 years. He had no idea what to do with it.
Until Peruggia saw an advert for an antique dealer in Florence offering to buy Italian paintings. The thief knew what to do with Gioconda. He'd take her back to Italy, where he believed she belonged.
And then he felt this incredible surge of patriotism. He's Italian. Leonardo, of course, was Italian. The painting was painted in Italy, and baby, it's time you went home.
But the moment Peruggia went public with the painting, things took a bad turn for him. What he didn't realise was that the Mona Lisa was simply too famous to be seen as merely an Italian work of art. Peruggia was arrested, and the painting was returned to Paris. All the city was thrilled to have the Mona Lisa back on the wall she knew so well. If it is back, rumours still circulate claiming that the painting in the Louvre is not the genuine Leonardo, but one of the 6 copies made in 1911.
On n'est jamais sûr de rien dans notre domaine, mais je dirais que là, on peut être sûr, étant donné la beauté de la, j'allais dire de la planche, mais de la planche peinte, étant donné la qualité superbe du tableau et tous les indices matériels, si vous voulez. Une fois que vous l'avez sorti de la vitrine, c'est absolument évident, c'est un tableau magnifique, c'est un chef-d'œuvre.
You might think that stealing a Leonardo today would be far, far harder than it was in 1911, but recent events in Scotland prove it can be surprisingly easy. Leonardo once again became the subject of a crime. At the end of August 2003, his Madonna with infant Jesus holding a yarn winder was taken from the Duke of Buccleuch's Drumlanrig Castle outside Glasgow in Scotland. The thieves bought tickets and joined a party of visitors. Waiting until the gallery emptied, one of the men forced an unarmed guard to the floor at knife point, while the others took the painting. It's valued at about $70 million. Mark Dalrymple is handling the insurance claim.
It's comparable to the theft of the Mona Lisa because it's this, a work by probably the same artist, that they're both highly important works, they're both small works, and they're both works which could never be sold. Ever. Publicly. Legitimately.
The motives for stealing such paintings, any paintings, is usually money. And today the stolen art is most often used to finance other criminal activities.
It's a barter process they can enter into. So swap it for drugs or arms. They could put it up as collateral for a loan, usually to another criminal. They say, I want to borrow money from you, say £50,000, and the man says, what will you put up as security? Well, I put up the picture. He then doesn't pay the £50,000 back because he can't, and the other man ends up with the picture. But he probably still thinks he can make £100,000 out of it.
One person who knows how to make a living out of art crime is America's most notorious art thief, Miles Connor. He spent hours on end in museum vaults across the USA. Connor has also served time in prison for dealing drugs and stealing art.
My viewpoint in the past is to take from the rich and benefit myself, not necessarily give to the poor, but it was to essentially take from institutions, or not individuals, but institutions that could afford the loss and could afford to buy it back.
Connor, who has repeatedly changed his looks over the decades, claims to be the brains behind the Gardner heist, the biggest unsolved art crime to date in the US, in which more than $300 million of art was stolen. Connor was also part of a gang that stole a Rembrandt from the Boston Museum of Fine Art. While he says he likes paintings as much as the next guy, he was never driven by the love of art.
You have to have a purpose for the paintings, like the Rembrandt stolen from the Museum of Fine Arts. The purpose with that was to use it as a bargaining chip to force the government down from another charge that they had on me. So that's why that was stolen. Then, when you have an order, somebody wants something, okay, and you find out you can access that, then you go to this person, you say, I can acquire these kind of paintings, do you still want them? And under those circumstances, then you get them sold.
As far as Connor's concerned, most museums are soft targets, especially their storage vaults where the vast majority of museum collections generally are found.
There's more in storage in museums than they have above on display. That's well known, and it's very, very, very true. Underneath the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, I've been in their storage areas many, many, many times. And I can tell you what they have down there is very fine, and it will never be on display. Hence, it'll never be missed. Hence, there is no feeling of remorse in taking what they have from their storage.
Connor earned his reputation by being light-fingered and light on his feet. He gained access to priceless paintings using methods we've all seen in the movies. In fact, a film about his exploits is currently being made. He may not be a millionaire, but he feels he's earned notoriety and status. To him, an art thief's much more than a common criminal.
There is a certain allure, a certain gravitational pull to find yourself in the basement of the storage area of the museum and know you have that whole place to yourself, and whatever in there can be yours if you want it. There's that element of to catch a thief. That's all part of the reputation of being an art thief, or preferably you don't have a reputation because you're the best thief when they don't know who you are, which was always the case when I was active. And so I didn't become notorious until afterwards. And so, yes, there is a certain element of allure or charm, if you will.
Connor may be the biggest art thief in America, but other countries suffer even more. Here's a top 5 according to Interpol figures from 2001. At number 5, Turkey. These days, drug smuggling gets stiff competition from art smuggling. But it's not just art in transit that's worrying the Turks. 1,700 pieces of art are stolen here every year. At number 4, Switzerland, the land of chocks and cuckoo clocks, and also a safe haven for stolen art from all over the world. In Switzerland itself, 3,100 items are nicked per year. Russia comes in at number 3 with 4,400 items. Most impressively and depressingly, more art is stolen from museums here than in any other country. In at number 2, the Czech Republic, with around 5,300 stolen works. More than 2,000 pieces of art are stolen from private collections in the Czech Republic every year, more than anywhere else. But the absolute loser is Italy, with 21,738 pieces of art. That's right, almost 22,000 pieces of art nicked per year. More than 4,200 of these were paintings or icons. So where do the crooks actually find their loot? Some sources say that 85% of all stolen art comes from private homes. Of that staggering amount, only 50% of all paintings are ever recovered. The sensible art thief apparently takes the path of least resistance and targets private collections in Italy, where a piece of art is stolen every 2 hours. Angelica Savigno owns a vast collection of paintings by her father Andrea and uncle Giorgio de Chirico, worth millions of dollars. Her uncle Giorgio had asked the police to keep an eye on her flat when she went away for an Easter weekend, but a quiet holiday turned out to be the ideal occasion for thieves to steal her entire collection.
Questo mi sembra di ricordare anche quello di mio zio De Chirico, che è un autoritratto, e anche quello grande.
The whole family was stunned, not least Savigno's ex-husband Marco Antonini, who was the first person to arrive at the scene of the crime.
It looked like a tornado had gone through the house. They took away all the paintings from the frames. They broke also the cupboards where the designs were and the sketches, and they left all the things that didn't have value, and they were able to get all the things that had a real serious value. They didn't miss one thing. Actually, they robbed everything that was in the house of value. It was absolutely a work of a high professional that knew what he was doing and knew what he was looking for.
The paintings on Angelica Savigno's walls comprised one of the best-known De Chirico collections in all Italy. But if the thieves were to pull off the heist successfully, they'd need to get the paintings out of the country as quickly as possible.
Ho provato, ma è difficile dire che cosa, ho provato uno sgomento terribile, però ho anche pensato che di questi quadri non sono commerciabili, perché sono tutti documentati e allora non li possono vendere.
If your entire art collection is stolen, sometimes it's better not to keep it to yourself. Mrs. Savigno cleverly spread the news about the robbery to make it impossible for the thieves to sell their loot abroad. Time was of the essence.
E tutti mi hanno detto, ah, ma lei non face niente, non ne parli con i giornalisti, non ne parli con nessuno. E io invece ho subito parlato con tutti i giornalisti, tutto quel che si poteva fare per fare venire fuori la notizia.
It worked. The attention the case was generating made it impossible for the thieves to get rid of their loot. Very soon after this, the Carabinieri received a tip-off from the criminal world and the thieves were arrested. 2 valuable lessons were learned. Don't steal a famous collection and don't talk about it to other thieves. They can't be trusted. But most thieves don't make mistakes. More than half of all stolen paintings are never recovered. Protecting yourself against professional art thieves is tricky. The bereaved family in Rome makes that painfully clear. Their collection was robbed despite the fact they'd asked the police to keep an extra lookout during the holidays. How long would it take a thief to get into this house and steal a painting? A professional security expert working for the SKG Security Management Company agreed to take on the challenge, confident he'd locate the Achilles heel of the house within minutes. In fact, it took seconds. The basement window, a part of the house commonly overlooked when new locks are installed. Inside, he's spotted by the CCTV camera. Not too much of a threat to a masked man of medium build. This scene makes it painfully clear that a practiced thief needs only seconds to get inside a house. He's in and out in 2 minutes, leaving the house a painting lighter. The next day, the painting's gone and the police have arrived way too late to do anything about it. A 2-minute heist doesn't give any response force enough time to do their work. Enter Ton Kremers, a security consultant for major European museums and private collectors. He's agreed to evaluate what went wrong here and make improvements.
It's a very vulnerable building. It's an 18th century beautiful mansion, which is located in a very isolated area, so it makes it extra vulnerable. And there are large portions of glass in the building. There's no protection whatever offered by the building. I understand there are some electronics, but electronics, they don't stop thieves. The building might stop thieves, but not electronics.
In Kremer's opinion, the art thief's biggest enemy is time. Cameras alone won't stop him. You may get a nice video of him in action, but it won't prevent him from swiping your portrait.
Well, first of all, you must take care that you have in a very early stage, there will be an electronic signal, so that the response forces can start their actions, and then the building itself must be able to stop the burglar.
Time to batten down the hatches and prevent another robbery. The first step is to secure the windows with super protective panes, complete with 3-star locks and hinges normally used in high-risk buildings like embassies and banks. This combination should keep the thief busy for at least 10 minutes. Inside, the potential thief will find the painting protected by 15mm of multi-layered glass, as strong as 6mm of steel. The glass is bulletproof, and a polycarbonate layer protects the painting from being damaged by splinters of glass in case it's shot or hit. This type of glass should stall a thief for another 15 minutes. A sensor system is installed in the ground around the building. When the thief steps on it, the system immediately sends a signal to the security company, tripping an alarm. Connected to the sensors is a hyper-modern CCTV camera, capable of turning 360 degrees. Its zoom capabilities are stunning. It's able to focus in on a mouse from 300 meters. The pictures the camera takes are directly transmitted to the security company.
We expect the response force here to be here in about 15 to 20 minutes. So altogether, with all the measurements we are taking, I think the thief will need at least 15 minutes to reach the painting, and then he needs 15 or maybe even 20 minutes to get the painting and get out again. So altogether, I think we will be organizing it in a very good way.
Private art collectors don't normally get a second chance, but this time they do. Will the professional burglar get past the new security measures and steal the painting before the police arrive? Remember, owners of historic houses like this one don't want to feel like they're living in a cage. You can't simply put bars on all the windows and line the basement with razor wire. But the fact that nothing looks as if it's been changed has its benefits. A thief won't be prepared for the security barriers he's confronted with, and the cellar window will still look like an average cellar window. But he's in for a surprise. The moment the burglar's feet touch the sensors, an alarm goes off at the security company in the nearby village. The CCTV camera, which registers any change in light, immediately focuses on the movement outside, and lights come on to scare off the burglar. The camera transmits its pictures directly to the security company 15 minutes away. Getting into the house means getting past the newly secured frame and pane. The 3-star hinges should keep him busy for at least 10 minutes. This new material indeed does what it's meant to. It won't keep a thief out forever, but it will buy time. professional thief a total of 9 minutes to get through the window. Inside, he's observed by another sensor that sets off a sound alarm. He's made it in, but he still has to get past the bulletproof polycarbonate. He attacks the glass with a hammer, but soon moves to an axe. The determined thief has been at it for 14 minutes now, but the response forces have nearly arrived. He takes one last shot before giving up, but it's no use. The polycarbonate is a mess and it isn't much to look at, but the painting on the inside is quite intact and it hasn't been stolen. So much for our art thief. But how do you protect yourself if your art needs to be more accessible? Most museums don't want their paintings behind thick glass walls, like the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, even though they've been robbed twice. Protecting yourself against art thieves is tricky, but not impossible. A security expert was initially able to get in and out of this mansion in 2 minutes. After security alterations, it took him 23 minutes, and he still wasn't able to make it through the bulletproof polycarbonate glass. But the thieves that robbed the Van Gogh Museum in 2002 did make it through the glass. They stole 2 paintings, cultural heritage that can never be replaced. A year after the crime, director John Layton can still hardly believe what happened. And like most of his colleagues in the museum world, he's willing to talk about the theft, which is still unsolved.
Church at Nuenen, this is actual size, an important early work which the artist painted for his mother. And here, the beach at Scheveningen, important in the collection, is actually one of the earliest known paintings by Van Gogh, just made at the very start of his career as a painter.
On an early December morning in 2002, thieves managed to climb onto the museum's roof, smash in a window and take 2 paintings. They got onto the roof with a ladder left outside by the museum's maintenance department. How can such an important collection have had such bad security?
Of course, all events, all actions can be prevented with hindsight and with the benefit of hindsight. On the other hand, we work to high standards of security, and the security here is generally regarded as high.
Tom Kremers was head of security at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. He now works as a private security consultant for major European museums and private collectors.
As far as the ladder is concerned, I don't think that was a real help to the criminals. If they wanted to get on the roof, they could have brought their own ladder. So it's not the ladder that could have prevented it. It might have been prevented by other measurements, especially as far as the outer shell of the building is concerned.
While the thieves could have brought their own ladder, it still seems phenomenally careless that a museum with some of the world's most valuable pieces of art should leave a ladder outside overnight. According to Tom Kremers, museums are generally on the wrong track when it comes to the kind of security they employ.
Museums in general have this inclination to depend on intruder alarm systems. But it's specific for intruder alarm systems that they don't stop intruders. They just give an alarm when someone tries to get into your building. So they should pay a lot more attention to the strength of the outer shell of the buildings. That's what stops or deters the criminals, not the electronics.
Yet many institutions argue that extensive security measures interfere with what's the basic function of a museum: public viewing.
Of course, any time that you allow the public access to the pictures, there's a risk. The safest thing to do would be to lock all the pictures up in an underground bunker, and you could talk about a very high standard of security.
The nearby Rijksmuseum faced exactly this challenge when they opened an annex at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. The gallery and the transit area is filled with extremely valuable Dutch masters and is therefore a high security risk. The solution was to put the paintings behind heavily protective glass. Safe? Yes. But have they created an art-friendly environment? The Van Gogh Museum don't think so.
What a The greatest challenge is finding the right balance between letting the public close to the pictures, allowing access to the art, creating a friendly, suitable environment, not the bunker I just mentioned, but combining that with, of course, the highest possible standards of security.
Yeah, he's right, but in this balance also belongs that he keeps his collection inside. So there has been a little bit imbalance in the situation in the Van Gogh Museum.
We're constantly changing, upgrading, updating security as circumstances dictate. Unfortunately, criminality is on the increase in society. Criminals are prepared to take ever more risks in carrying out their actions. We can only hope to match and prevent. The guarantee that something won't happen in the future can never be given, but you just try your best to stay one step ahead.
For a country with such an impressive art history, the Dutch police seem to be doing very little to fight art crime. They refuse to comment on this case.
No, the police are not doing enough at all to find art crime. They just regard art crime as regular theft, which is not true. There used to be a special bureau in the Netherlands, a very small bureau, only 2 people were working there. And this was closed about 2 years ago, which means that also the international links to Interpol have been cut off. Police is doing very little.
Perhaps the greatest fear is that the pictures will some way become damaged, irretrievably damaged, or even lost. In the meantime, we've offered a reward of 100,000 euros, hopefully provoking someone to come who knows something to come forward and help us with the return of the paintings.
And one of the reasons why we have an increase in crime is not just that it's easy to steal artworks, but increasingly it's very lucrative because insurance companies are prepared to do deals with thieves. If you are an insurance company and you stand to lose 40 million, whereas you can do a deal with a thief or an intermediary for a thief and only pay 2 million or 2.5 thousand pounds or something, it's profitable to you. And that's what thieves, I am convinced, increasingly are realising. They can sit on them, stick them in the back of the wardrobe, and after a few years try and do a deal.
With today's criminal techniques and a good plan, there's not a painting in the world that's safe. As long as galleries keep their doors open to the public, crooks will get in. A submachine gun will ensure the cooperation of just about anyone and give you access to just about anything. A Van Gogh, a Rembrandt, perhaps even the Mona Lisa, however safe her smile seems behind all that glass.
I believe that there is no painting in the world that has such a high security that you can't steal it in somehow.
In 3 years' time, the brains behind the Stockholm heist will be free. Sven says he's going straight, but he still has his fantasies.
The Mona Lisa is, of course, the crown jewel. It would be a challenge to go for it.
But you think it's possible?
Everything is possible.
World's most incredible and successful forgeries. In 2002, the city's Sophia Imber Museum of Contemporary Art made a shocking discovery. The museum's only painting by the great French artist Henri Matisse, Odalisque with red pantaloons valued at $3 million, had been switched, and switched with a rather poor fake. The painting was one of the very few Matisses in South America and is still missing. The only thing the museum's got left is this poster. Incredibly, despite the glaring differences between the fake here on the left and the original, it wasn't until years afterwards, in late 2002, that anyone in the museum noticed their Matisse had been stolen.
We discovered amazing differences between the fake, this graceful fake, and the original painting the moment we brought the painting down to this lab. One of them is the dark shade between 2 green stripes in the wallpaper, which is, they are not here in the original. And of course the drapery on the chair and the proportions of the head, which are harmonious and beautiful on the original painting, are not here.
The question, of course, is how? How had this bizarre situation come about? There are several shaky theories and a host of unsolved leads, but nobody's come up with any hard evidence for what happened. The one thing everyone agrees on is that at some point, somebody painted a fake Matisse and switched it with the original. As long as artists have been painting, other artists have been copying them. Approximately 40% of all art is fake. The odalisque case differs from most because successful forgers usually create new work in the style of the artist. Here, an exact copy was made. Resemblance is important in forgery, but the key is credibility. For the finishing touch, forgers often use a variety of ridiculously simple techniques to make their creations look older. Coffee's good, so's vacuum cleaner dust. Forgeries are often commissioned by other, more serious criminals. In the case of the odalisque, it was clearly someone with access to the museum. The museum's prized possession was switched with apparent ease, and not one person noticed. At some point, the fake Matisse was hung up in the museum, and for years afterwards, their hordes of visitors gazed in admiration at a bad copy. Meanwhile, the real Matisse travelled the world. It was offered for sale in several cities, finally ending up in Miami, where somebody sounded the alarm. Henri Matisse was offered for sale at the Fortress Art Storage Company. Just one problem: the important work of art was supposed to be hanging in the Museum for Contemporary Art in Caracas, Venezuela. The prospective buyers decided to ask the advice of art dealer Gennaro Ambrosino because a lot of money was at stake, and they wanted to be sure their real Matisse was the real McCoy.
I got really suspicious because the only Matisse of which I had knowledge was the Matisse of the Museum of Contemporary Art. So I went back to the gallery and got the book of the collection of the Museum of Contemporary Art, which I have there, and I opened it to the page where the Odalisca del Pantalón Rojo was, and I showed it to them, and I said, "Is this the painting that you're being sold?" And they said, "Yes, that's the painting." I said, "Are you sure that it's the same one?" And one of them said, "Yes, and I know that it's a real one."
Ambrosino's story is that he called the museum in Caracas several times to warn them that their Matisse was on sale, but he got no response. Suspecting that the museum was secretly selling off the Matisse, Ambrosino decided to take action. He fired off an email to the Venezuelan art world.
The Matisse this client is talking about, odalisque in red pants, surprises me very much, because that's the Matisse from the Museum of Contemporary Art in Caracas.
The news spread quickly round the globe. The message that a painting which should be in a Venezuelan museum was actually on sale in Miami baffled the art world. In Caracas, reporter Edgar Moreno of the Venezuelan daily El Mundo couldn't believe what was in his inbox.
Cuando recibo el email, pues di un grito, ¿no? Me dije yo, ¿cómo? Esto es un escándalo. Yo llego y llamo al museo, me contesta Silvia Neresop, le digo, mira, yo tengo este email que dice esto, me dice, Edgar, vente para acá y vamos a la bóveda. En efecto, yo fui, me mostraron el cuadro, ¿no? Este cuadro que está aquí es el cuadro que me muestran. Yo no me imaginé que era el falso. 2 días después, eso es el 29 de noviembre, Rita tiene que reconocer que este es el cuadro falso.
Rita Salvestrini was the director of the museum at the time of the humiliating discovery. How could someone have switched their priceless Matisse for a worthless forgery?
I was shocked the moment I realized that we had been showing a fake. I remember that this was a Sunday, and I immediately started to call the Ministry of Culture and took action. I was not prepared for that discovery.
The museum had been robbed of their multi-million-dollar Matisse, and not a soul had noticed. But why did the thieves even bother to make a forgery at all? Wouldn't it have been far easier just to steal the painting?
Necesitaban ganar tiempo. Entre más tiempo entre más tiempo se mantuviese el secreto, mejor para ellos, porque tenían oportunidad de vender la obra, de ofrecerla.
Years passed and the fake hung in there in the museum. There's still no hard evidence on when and how the swap was made, but there are some leads as to what happened to the original painting. Let's go back in time. In October 2000, the Matisse was offered to French art dealers visiting New York. Later that year, the painting appeared in various places, with documents to suggest that museum employees approved the sale of the painting. The documents were authorized in Caracas, but may have been forged. Paris, 1 year later, the stolen painting appeared again. In December 2001, Wanda de Gubriant, International Authority on Matisse, is shown the painting for authentication. She recognized it as the real thing, but refused to provide a certificate as she knew the painting belonged to the museum in Caracas. A certificate would greenlight its sale. The Matisse expert called the former museum director to tell her what had happened, but despite the eye-opening news, no action was taken. Back to the present, news of the Matisse heist and the fact that a fake had hung in the museum for so long made for an embarrassing scandal. Key figures in the museum's administration had already been replaced due to other irregularities, which only made matters worse. Rita Salvestrini, director at the time of the incredible discovery, believes the theft was an inside job.
I believe the switch was made right here in this lab where we are now. And my argument is that this piece of wood, which is loose and does not match with the original stretcher, is found right here. And also the stapling machine that was used to staple the canvas once the other was removed is right here in this lab. So they needed to come down here and do all these operations and then perhaps return the painting to the space where it was. I believe that someone from inside had to be behind this theft and switch.
Gennaro Ambrosino, the Miami art dealer who made the news public, is also certain that someone in the museum was involved.
Also because the buyers were told that the people that had the Matisse, they could get their hands on a few of the Picassos that the museum owned.
Whoever had access to the museum was planning on stealing more of its famous works. Investigation has proved that other pieces of art were also missing, but none as important as the Odalisque by Matisse, which to this day hasn't been recovered. Either the thieves finally managed to sell the piece or it's stashed away until this hot art grows a little cooler. The last time the real Matisse was seen was in Miami in December 2002, just after Ambrosino alerted the art world. An unidentified Venezuelan woman collected the painting from the art storage company and fled the country. The case is being investigated by the FBI, Interpol and local police in the US, Venezuela and Europe. So far, they've drawn only blanks. Faking it in the art world is big business. Which artists have the dubious honour of being the forger's favourites? At number 5, Marc Chagall, the French painter. This artist was obsessed with nabbing anyone who copied his work, and he and his lawyer liked nothing better than chasing forgers to the four corners of the globe. At number 4, the Spanish surrealist Joan Miro. According to experts, Miro's rather limited repertoire of colours and patterns makes faking him fairly easy. Another reason that modern artists are favoured by forgers, their materials like canvas and paint can still be bought in any artist's supply shop. Number 3, the one and only Pablo Picasso, who took more of a relaxed view of forgery. Somebody once showed Picasso a copy of one of his works. Picasso asked, "How much did you pay?" "Ah," he replied, "that much, then it must be genuine." In at number 2, Henri Matisse, who proves that forgers can be found closer to home. Near the end of his career, Matisse had an affair with a chambermaid, who was later appointed as an official Matisse expert. Rumour has it that she made a fortune by vouching for thousands of fakes, supposedly by her ex. And the unrivaled number one, the surreal but often faked Salvador Dali, whose works have long been associated with fraud. It's a public secret that Dali used to sell blank canvases with his signature on them. His former secretary was arrested and charged with having forged 10,000 lithographs. There are forgers who go way beyond this top 5, as proved in 1999 when the arrest of John Drew, aka the Puppet Master, exposed one of the world's greatest cases of fraud. Drew made millions of pounds selling reproductions painted by his partner John Myatt using common house paint. After serving time in prison, Myatt now lives in Staffordshire in England with his wife. He was the artist creating new works in the style of famous masters like Van Gogh, Matisse and Monet to Drew's orders. Myatt started innocently enough, painting so-called genuine fakes for ordinary people who just wanted to have a nice Giacometti above their mantelpiece, until he met his partner in crime.
It was a man called, it was a very nice man called Mr. John Drew, and we became good friends for a year. He worked as a normal customer. I worked, I must have done him about 10 paintings for £250 each. Normally, I think most people had 2 or 3 paintings, but this one particular person had painting after painting after painting after painting, and it was quite strange actually, but he was a good customer, and his checks didn't bounce, so I was very happy with that. And as he got to know me better, I suppose he found out about, my domestic circumstances, how things were at home. He called up one day and said, look, that painting you just sold me for £250, I took it down to Christie's last week, and they valued it at £25,000.
This was the start of a brilliant criminal career. 15% of Myatt's works were fake Giacomettis. Some sources claim that more than half of all the Giacomettis in the world are forged.
The Giacometti nude here would be possibly about 100 to 120, 130,000 pounds, something like that. I'll sell that for much less than that. In fact, I think these Giacomettis I'm doing now are actually better than the Giacomettis I was doing when I was forging them. The quality is much better now. I never did exact copies. I don't think there's any point in doing. I mean, any fool can do that, really. What I did was I looked at the artist that I was interested in, and I looked at the problems that they were looking at in, say, 1920, 1930, 1940, and I painted another painting, created a new painting that could have come from that artist in that time. So they were totally new works. I didn't copy anything. I mean, if we were just coming up with copies of paintings, everybody would say, well, that's a copy of one that's already on the market. I mean, artists don't work like that. No, you had to come up with a new, visually new thing each time. Didn't always work, but quite often it was a good move.
The stupefying thing was, Myatt was creating these artworks with ordinary house paint, and nobody noticed.
I still use the same kind of paint as I used then, which is house paint. I use just house paint here, and I mix it with acrylic paint. I don't use oil paint until the very end. Sometimes I'll finish off with oil paint just to find out if I want depth of colour. But I don't like the smell of oil paint. It makes me kind of, so I prefer to use this kind of paint.
Myatt churned out one DIY masterpiece after another, and the art world literally bought it.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I really was surprised by that. It just seemed so unbelievable, really.
It was the genius of Myatt's partner, John Drew, who's disappeared without a trace since being released from prison, that made all of this possible. Myatt's artistic talents were indispensable to the venture, but in order to sell paintings in today's market, you need more than just a good eye. Drew managed to sell some of Myatt's works for hundreds of thousands of pounds at auction houses like Sotheby's and to museums like the Tate and the Victoria and Albert in London. How? He faked their papers, their provenance, to create false evidence that Myatt's paintings were genuine. The policeman who put Drew and Myatt behind bars, Mickey Volpe, is still impressed by Drew's ingenuity.
Mr. Drew managed to ingratiate himself with certain people at a number of institutions, including the Tate and including the V&A in London. With regard to the Tate Gallery, he even made a donation. So he became a benefactor of the Tate, which obviously at the time they thought was genuine, but of course the motive behind it was that having become a benefactor and having become very well known at the Tate, he was then given access to some of the archive material that he was particularly interested in.
According to John Myatt, Drew had a variety of techniques to fool his customers.
As far as I can tell you, the paintings would come down from my house, and then he would actually make the stretchers, change the stretchers of the painting so they were old stretchers. Change the tacks, little tacks in the side, dip them in salty water so they'd go rusty. I think someone told me that he actually emptied a vacuum cleaner in so there's bits of dust gets in the corner, and all this straightforward stuff really. Nothing too, not exactly rocket science, but it did make a new thing look like an old thing.
Instant coffee is perfect for instant aging.
Well, the stronger the coffee, the darker the mixture of coffee, the more it will actually pick up these little tiny bits of grain texture of the canvas as it runs down the surface of the painting.
I do it when a customer asks me to. Sometimes I've painted things and they've said it's very good, but it looks new. And there are a variety of ways you can put coloured varnish on. I mean that's we're knocking something down. I prefer not to do it if I can get away with not doing it. But people like it. People want it. If you're trying to persuade your friends you've got a Braque from 1910 on the wall, it's got to look 90 years old, doesn't it?
Policeman Mickey Volpe's convinced that many people have fake art hanging on their walls. If museums and auction houses can't tell the difference, how can you? And if you did, would you come clean?
It is probably the case that there are many paintings that are still out there that we have not recovered, and it may well be the case that there are private people who have been duped and conned, have paid their good money for a Myatt painting, and maybe because of their own self-respect, they don't really want everybody to know that they were conned or duped.
John Myatt seems well over his time in prison. He's no longer in touch with Drew and makes a living doing what he does best, painting. Only these days he confesses that his works are fakes. Despite no longer passing off copies as the genuine article, he still can't understand what all the fuss was about.
It is the only crime I can think of where there are no victims. If you think about it, if it had worked properly and the painting was sold for an amount of money, it would then have developed a life of its own and would just have gone on into the future, changing hands as they do for years to come, and no one would have lost any money.
Whatever John Myatt chooses to believe, forgery does have victims. One of those victims is Henk Plenter from the Netherlands, who's been duped on several occasions, like the time he and his wife visited Amsterdam's art area, the Spiegel district.
So we were browsing there, and suddenly, in one of these posh galleries, we found a Matisse, this one. It is a blue lady with apples around. It's a screen print, edition of 50. And it's signed in full, Henri Matisse. And we were admirers of Matisse, so we thought, that's ours.
Plenter bought the Matisse and hung it on his wall. A few years later, he read an article about a Dutch master forger and made the startling discovery that his prized Matisse was a worthless fake. Plenter says he lost much more than money.
Well, the magic is gone, What's the magic of this? Well, the fact that Henri Matisse has signed this himself. Yeah, there's a kind of legend around it. You don't only buy this, but you buy the legend as well, that you have a real Matisse signed by the master himself. And that illusion is gone suddenly. and then you don't like it anymore. It has not changed as far as its aspects are concerned, but it is, the legend is gone, and you say, away with it.
The artist responsible for fooling Plente was Geert Jan Jansen, a skilled forger who in his time managed to fool the entire art world with a flood of forgeries.
I normally have an opinion, and it's in 95% of the cases it's the right opinion, which I just check afterwards using a scientific technique.
To find out if a particular piece is genuine, Laycock takes samples of paintings, cutting out minuscule pieces to determine how old the artworks are and whether the pigments and materials match those the original artist used. To establish an object's age, Laycock uses a method known as thermoluminescence.
As you see, curves will appear here, showing the thermoluminescence of the object. Unfortunately, the TL of the specific object here, as you see, is almost nothing. It means that it's a fake. If it had been a genuine, we would have a curve roughly like this one. We are using quite a lot of techniques. We're using the C14 for the wood, the thermoluminescence for the ceramics, analysis for the paintings, microscopy and metallography for the bronzes, microscopy for the stones, gammography, fluorescence, infrared.
But every move Laycock makes is countered by forgers who stay one step ahead. He's increasingly confronted by criminal techniques even more advanced than his own.
I can really say that for about 5 years, fakers has entered into a new era, which I would call the era of scientific fakes. It means that they are aware of the scientific methods we are using to detect fakes. And we can even say that they are working sometimes with universities or scientists who are helping them to provide the market with better fakes.
Laycock is frequently asked to use his considerable skills at auctions and art markets. At the yearly Antiques Fair in Antwerp, it's his job to sift out the fakes before the public arrive. He has to judge thousands of pieces of art in one day. He uses his experience and his nose.
And there are still evidence of old lacquer and gilding, and plenty of evidence of authenticity on the surface.
And within a few minutes, Laycock finds his first fake.
The casting is of poor quality. And it's not copper or bronze, it's brass. It's an alloy of copper and zinc. As soon as I find something which is doubtful, too doubtful or fake, I will take it away, or at least I will put a sticker on it, and people, specialized transporter, will take it away, store it in a storage room, so that they won't be back to the fair until the end of it.
If an object is revealed as a fake by Laycock, its value instantly plummets. His skills made him many enemies, and some art dealers will go to great lengths to have their objects authenticated.
Of course, since it has become an organized crime, it is rather dangerous sometimes for experts. For instance, in Thailand or even in Hong Kong, where antique dealers have been obliged to reimburse some of my customers who were bringing back their piece with my certificates. I can even tell you that in Bangkok, for instance, my head has been put on price because they really, yes, they are fighting against experts, because that's the people who are forbidden them to just sell easily their merchandise.
Ça, c'est de Marc Chagall.
Even with the most rigorous scientific tests, it can take years to expose a master forger. For decades, Dutch painter Geert Jan Janssen flooded the market with his fakes, works with uncanny resemblances to pieces by Miro, Chagall, Picasso and Matisse, until finally he was caught in France. Today, Janssen visits one of the many secret places where he used to work.
Ja, dat was in die tijd de sport om dingen ouder te doen lijken. En daar was stof groot hulpmiddel bij. Ja, ik gooide ook wel eens de inhoud van een stofzuigerzak over een gouache of over een schilderij uit. Maar hij legde ook wel eens een tekening of een gouache gewoon onder de deurmat. En dan na een week zag hij er wel een stuk ouder uit. En een andere goede methode was sowieso om de dingen in de zon te zetten. Dat ze bleker worden, krakeleren. En een puntje schoensmeren door de fornis, zulke soort dingen.
Janssen claims he's no longer forging. Nowadays he puts little marks on his paintings that are proof of his good intentions. In his atelier in Amsterdam, the makings of masterpieces by the likes of Picasso and Matisse are everywhere, including just the right paint, just the right brushwork and exactly the right inks. Janssen studied art history and worked as an art dealer for years, so he knew the market very well when he started forging. He usually begins a new piece with a signature, because even if you create a masterpiece, if you don't get the signature right, what's the point?
It's a long time I did the Chagall signature, so I have to find it back. So I see. There's a note. And I like very much the Picasso. It's very. This is the late Picasso signature. Dat het liefst staand.
Being a forger, Janssen tries to crawl into the mind of the original artist.
Ja, je moet even kijken of het goede penseeltje is. Het moet niet te breed en niet te lang zijn. Ik knip er ook wel eens een stukje af.
Today Janssen's finishing a Karl Appel, one of Holland's most famous contemporary artists.
Het is een heel agenebisch kwastje met varkenshaar. Maar dat is juist bij Appel goed.
Janssen's secret, just like fellow forger John Myatt, was not to make exact copies of existing works. His goal was to create new masterpieces inspired by great artists.
En ik ben in de loop van de jaren zelfs gaan denken, valse schilderijen. Ik maak helemaal geen valse schilderijen. Ik maak echte schilderijen, want ja, ze werden ook allemaal goedgekeurd door de experts in Parijs en in Londen. Dus ik dacht, ik maak echte Picasso's. Andere mensen maken valse Picasso's, maar ik maak echte. Dat ben ik echt in de loop van de jaren gaan denken. Dat is natuurlijk heel raar achteraf, maar zo ging het wel.
The art market was booming and Janssen's fakes had infiltrated it. Things were going well. So well that the Dutch police were onto him. He decided it was time to find a more secluded place to continue his work. So he and his wife Ellen van den Bergen moved to France, changing names and addresses often to avoid being traced. But they always made sure to be near cities with access to art markets, like Paris and Orléans. Eventually, they found a safe haven, where they could escape judicial heat and where Janssen could continue to forge valuable artworks in peace. But for how long?
Ja, ik had op een gegeven moment een château met een prachtig landgoed was dat, met een oprijlaan en aan de rivier en zo, maar ook met 13 salons. En daar had ik ateliers in gemaakt. Dus één atelier voor Picasso, één voor Matisse, één voor Chagall. Dan had ik alle boeken, materialen en spullen daar klaar liggen.
The chateau was a full-scale art factory. 13 rooms, one for each forged artist, filled with canvases, brushes, paint and books. Which painter Janssen forged on a given day was determined by his mood. Everything was set up. All he had to do was walk through the door.
En dan ging ik met plezier 's morgens een Chagall maken, 's middags een paar appels en 's avonds nog een tekening van Picasso.
An apple a day may keep the doctor away, but what about the police? Janssen's good life couldn't last. His tranquility was brought to an end by German Chief Inspector Ernst Schuller of the Bundeskriminalamt, who's been chasing forgers for over 20 years. Thanks to Schuller's work, Janssen was arrested in 1994.
Das war das Haus, das Herr Janssen mit Frau Ellen Baren angemietet hatte und bewohnt hatte. Hier ist man in die Küche rein und in der Küche hingen dann schon die ersten Chagalls und die ersten Bilder. Die Rückseite des Hauses war also ein sehr großes Gebäudeareal mit verschiedenen Ateliers. Und hier haben wir dann Frau von Baren begrüßt und später dann die Bilder mit einem Möbelwagen abtransportiert.
Ja, er was een onderzoek begonnen. Vanuit Duitsland zijn ze me gaan zoeken. Ik had een spelfout gemaakt in een certificaat van een Chagall die ik in München had ingebracht op de veiling.
Schuller got on Janssen's trail when he found out that a fake stamp had been used on a certificate for a Chagall drawing. It looked like master forger Janssen had made a mistake.
Also hier haben wir jetzt die Arbeiten von Herrn Janssen, die er in deutsche Auktionshäuser eingeliefert hat. Das waren insgesamt 11 verschiedene Auktionshäuser. Das sind Appelarbeiten mehrere. Das sind Ascoyon-Arbeiten, Sonia Delaunay, Magritte-Arbeiten, auch dann mit der entsprechenden Echtheitsbestätigung der Witwe Magritte, die natürlich genauso gefälscht ist wie das Bild.
Schuller was determined to put Janssen behind bars. His investigation took him to France, where, together with the French police, he finally arrested Janssen at a train station after a 4-day search. The police confiscated every object in Janssen's chateau. Almost 1,500 paintings were impounded, along with the papers that accompanied them.
Auf der Rückseite dieser Arbeiten befindet sich dann immer eine Bestätigung des jeweiligen Experten in Schreibmaschine mit entsprechendem Stempel, mit der entsprechenden Unterschrift. Für diese Herstellung dieser Fälschungen hat er nicht nur diese Stempel benutzt, sondern auch 30 verschiedene Schreibmaschinen, die wir in seinem Haus gefunden haben. Und diese Gutachten haben dann diese Bilder begleitet.
All the many artworks found in Janssen's chateau were confiscated and taken to Orléans. Janssen spent half a year in a French prison awaiting trial. He was found guilty of fraud but appealed the ruling. He lost the appeal, was sentenced to another 6 months, but by then Janssen had skipped bail and was back in Holland. The French still haven't decided what to do with Janssen's vast collection, locked up in their basement. The police initially planned to destroy it, but Janssen now claims some of the paintings are real. He says the French are worried they're genuine artworks.
Maar er is dus nog steeds, dat is wel het interessante, er is nog steeds niet uitgezocht dus wat ik geschilderd heb en wat Picasso en Matisse hebben geschilderd. Dat waren eigenlijk ook dezelfde experts die ze weer om advies gevraagd hebben, die 20 jaar lang mijn werk als authentiek hebben aangewezen van Picasso en Matisse en al die andere kunstenaars, Chagall, Miro.
The latest news is that the French have made Janssen an offer. If he comes to France, he'll be able to collect all his original works that aren't forgeries. The catch? If he sets foot in France, he'll be locked up for 6 months. But, fully aware that his career was not without risk, Janssen had taken precautions. Just before he was arrested, he put about 100 works aside for safekeeping. The package arrived from Antwerp this morning. Janssen still takes enormous pride in his work.
Ja, Paul Davaux. Dit is Etsen van Marguerite. Nou, ik denk dat 1% van wat ik gemaakt heb herkend is als werk van mij. Ik zie ze wel eens in een catalogus van de veiling staan. Enkele staan in een boek. En dat is nog zeldzamer. Een paar schilderijwerken zijn ook in een museum terecht gekomen.
In welke musea?
Nou ja, nee, Nee, dat ga ik niet zeggen. Die hangen daar veel te mooi. Laat die dan maar rustig hangen.
We can only guess at how big the legacy of forgers like Geert Jan Jansen is. Countless fakes by his hand and other forgers still hang in private homes, auction houses, galleries and even museums. But if you don't want to be stung by one of these counterfeiters, here are 5 ways to ruin a forger's day. A signature doesn't mean a thing. As we've seen, practice makes perfect. Thousands of prints and lithographs of original works are published unsigned in art books or portfolios. Forgers cut them out of the books, add the signature and put them on sale, especially on online auction sites. For a more technical or forensic approach, bring a magnifying glass whenever you buy art. This makes it easy to detect whether a painting on offer is nothing but a poster. The dots you discover will prove clearly that it's offset print work and worthless. If you want to be fully prepared, bring a black light. This will reveal things that can't be seen in broad daylight, like restorations. Don't believe everything you read. Always be suspicious, especially when an art dealer starts shoving documents under your nose, trying to distract you from the painting you want to buy. Remember, a certificate or a stamp is much easier to forge than a painting. Take a look at the back of a painting as well as the front. If a painting's supposed to be 50 years old, then the back should look 50 years old as well. And tip 5 comes from the master himself, Geert Jan Jansen.
Als je schilderij gaat kopen en het moet 5 jaar oud zijn, dan moet je wel kijken of de verf droog is, ja.
The ultimate arbiters of whether a piece is fake or genuine are the experts. But with art, can experts be relied on? For the art world as theft, maybe bigger. When a painting's stolen, it's a cut and dried case. The work's gone and you try to get it back. But with suspected forgery, things take a vague turn. How can you be 100% certain that a painting is real or fake? Especially when the forgers have gone to so much trouble to be authentic. You could take it to a laboratory to do serious scientific tests. But if you buy a painting from a gallery or at a small auction, you don't always have the time or the money to have it scientifically authenticated. A serious test can take weeks. There is, of course, provenance, the documents, if they haven't been forged as well. In the end, you have no choice but to rely on the experts. But do they always get it right? And what do they base their judgment on? At the Cobra Museum outside of Amsterdam, 3 experts agreed to be put to the test to see if a determined forger can outwit them. Their assignment is to authenticate 5 works of art by Carl Appel, using only their experience. They know nothing about the artwork's provenance. Pieces 1, 2 and 3 are fake, borrowed from forger Geert Jan Jansen. The only original works are numbers 4 and 5. Expert number 1 is Richard Hessink, who owns an auction house in the east of Holland and judges art on a daily basis.
It's like 70% expertising and 30% is gambling.
Expert number 2, Henk van der Vet, artist and friend of Carl Appel. He's printed countless apples himself.
Het is ook een gevoelskwestie. En het papier is belangrijk. Het formaat is belangrijk.
Expert 3, Lex Daniels of the Reflex Modern Art Gallery, an Apple collector and owner of a huge collection of fake prints.
Maar meestal als ik het zeg dat het goed is, dan is het goed. Of altijd als ik zeg dat het goed is het goed.
Time to start the test. Will the experts spot the fakes? They're left alone with only their knowledge and their experience.
A piece of art like this, it's looking for the paper and it's looking for the color, because they're always, this is from 1971, so that's a piece what is old 32 years now. So you have to look to the color. The color can't be so bright as in the early times that it is printed for the first time.
Ja, ik let onder andere op de papiersoort, de manier van drukken en een beetje op de handtekening.
beetje door te slaan. Kijk, die inktjes slaan door. Zie je? In de loop der tijd.
Number 3 is a masterpiece by convicted forger Geert Jan Jansen, and it looks like it's fooling them all.
Ice is one of the paper what is very often used by Karel Appel. So this one is okay.
Dit is een beetje klungelige handtekening, maar ja, dat kan. Maar ik ben ervan overtuigd dat hij goed is.
Ik ben er bijna verzekerd dat hij goed is. Dat zeg ik alleen, de handtekening is erg knullig voor een appel, dus de handtekening kan ook. Maar dat zeg ik, elke handtekening is net zoals een vingerafdruk is anders.
Time for the verdict from our jury of experts. Which pieces are real and which are fake? Number 1 is a fake.
Deze is vals.
Niet goed.
This one is not okay.
Number 2, also fake.
Het is ook vals.
Twijfel? Ik denk dat hij wel goed is, maar ik weet het niet zeker.
This one I'm not 100% sure, say 50-50, but I don't think so that it's real.
After 2 pieces, the experts are doing fine. Just one little mistake on number 2. Over to number 3, also a fake.
Deze zeg ik, ja, het enige gekke is dat die handtekening niet klopt, maar als print denk ik dat die goed is.
Die is goed.
This is a good one.
Interesting. According to Jansen, this piece is fake, yet all the experts think it's real. Over to number 4, a real apple.
Ik denk dat deze, dat zeg ik dat deze wel goed is.
Ja, die is goed hoor. Die is goed.
This is a good one.
And finally number 5, another real apple.
Ja, deze is ook goed.
Nee, maar die is onmiskenbaar goed.
And this one is not good as well.
Time to confront the experts with the truth. Most of them were able to distinguish the authentic works from the forgeries. The only piece they were all wrong on was number 3, borrowed from our convicted forger Geert Jan Jansen.
These are the good ones? Yeah. This one not. But it's printed on RC paper.
Deze? Ja. Hey. Ja, qua kleuren zou ik het zeggen, maar ik zei het al met die handtekening.
Dit is de enige die op de oeuvre gravé-papier gemaakt is.
Ja, ik ben het er niet mee eens.
Het oeuvre gravé-papier, dat is, ja, dat zit erin. Dan kun je dat ook wel weer namaken. En daarom geloof ik, hij kan wel vergeten Jan zijn, maar misschien dat hij nog echt is ook.
So who's fooling who? Did Jansen in fact substitute a real apple for a fake, or are some of his forgeries so brilliant that nobody can tell? We'll never know. Geert Jan Jansen's keeping a low profile these days, but has he given up painting? No, like John Myatt, he's still painting in the style of others, but to avoid any confusion, he signs his work with his own name. Unless a customer has other ideas.
Ik zet op de achterkant mijn eigen naam er ook nog een keer op. Ja, er zijn wel eens mensen die zeggen, ja, ik wil die tekening van je kopen, maar ik kan dat er niet af. Ja, die moeten dan zelf maar gaan gunnen.
The world after drugs and illicit arms deals. Only 50% of the paintings robbed from museums and private collections are ever recovered. So what are the police doing about this?
There are countries who really do not perceive art crime as being a problem at all.
While the police have their hands full catching killers and car thieves, private detectives are happy to step into the art crime gap. Able to do things less by the book than their uniformed counterparts, these independent investigators often stretch the limits of how far you can go. They earn their living in a system where you're rewarded primarily for bringing paintings back.
I came to the conclusion that some items of property are more important than the people who steal them.
Is getting your art back more important than putting criminals behind bars? What does it take to recover a stolen painting? And who do you turn to when your Picasso is pinched? Giulianova in Italy on July the 2nd, 2000. The residents of this picturesque seaside town were all at home glued to the television for the Euro Cup final, Italy v France. The score is 0-0. As the match got underway, two notorious art thieves headed for the Santuario della Madonna dello Splendore, an ordinary church with an extraordinary collection of art worth millions of dollars. Neither the neighbours nor the priest noticed as the men broke into the church, an old building with no alarms and no guards. A man out for a walk noticed movement inside, but walked on. He assumed it was just the priest. The thieves set about removing the first of the 5 14th century paintings which they'd earmarked. A cheer went up across town when Italy almost scored. It briefly startled the thieves. As the robbers removed the final painting, they made an amateurish mistake. The sound pierced the din from the priest's television, and he set off to check all was well in the sanctuary. But just as he left the room, Italy scored, putting them ahead of France. The town went wild, and the football-loving priest returned to watch the replay. Saved by the goal, although Italy weren't, they lost the match, the men quickly loaded the huge paintings onto the van and made their getaway. When the theft was discovered by Padre Paolino the next morning, the town was stunned. While the paintings were extremely valuable, it was the theft of objects with such religious significance that caused even greater upset.
The thieves must have had supernatural powers, because when we went to Holy Mass on the morning of July the 3rd, we found the frames of the paintings in the chancel. And we asked ourselves, how did they manage that?
Padre Paolino's church is far from unique. 22,000 pieces of art are stolen in Italy on a yearly basis, 10% of which come from churches. Fortunately for the Padre, Italy's the only country in the world with its own police art squad, the Carabinieri Commando for the Protection of Cultural Heritage. The investigative unit is run by Lieutenant Colonel Ferdinando Musella, a man whose job it is to see that lost art gets found. Italy on July the 3rd, 2000. The Carabinieri art squad set off to the little seaside town of Giulianova. The night before, while the entire village had been watching the Euro Cup final on television, the local church was robbed of 4 paintings by Giacomo Forelli and 1 painting by Paolo Cagliari, better known as Veronese. The paintings are collectively worth more than $5 million. To avoid being noticed, the thieves who stole the paintings from the church in Giulianova took the back way in, down some stairs and through a small door used only by the priests.
We lock all the entrances to the church just like you would lock all the doors of your house. But we didn't even have an alarm system at the time. We installed one after the burglary.
Such alarms are still rare, and art crime is still flourishing in Italy. According to UNESCO, 60% of all the art in the world is found here. Churches are particular favourites for art thieves. It's easy to see why. Millions of dollars of art and not a single alarm or guard to be seen. Enter the Carabinieri Commando for the Protection of Cultural Heritage. The squad's 300 agents recover about 3,000 stolen artefacts a year, 70% from abroad. After many years in the business, Lieutenant Colonel Ferdinando Musella knows his thieves.
There are thieves who specialize in church burglaries. They only steal things from churches and never from homes. And then there's a group who we, the Carabinieri, call the Battery of Housebreaking Specialists. When they burgle a house, they make a careful selection and choose items that are hot on the market.
The Giulianova robbery had all the markings of a highly professional job. The thieves took only the valuable paintings and left the rest behind. But how did they plan to get rid of a couple of king-sized religious paintings that were sacred and famous across Italy? The Carabinieri had to operate with the utmost speed, because large religious paintings like these are often cut into smaller, commercially viable pieces by the art thieves. The vaults of the Carabinieri are filled with retrieved paintings waiting to be returned to their rightful owners. Musella has a lot of experience of the tricks which thieves try to play.
The larger pieces are cut to size for two reasons. Firstly, an altarpiece of 2 by 3 meters is difficult to sell because not very many people have such big walls in their homes. And secondly, because cutting it is a way of masking the painting, in the sense that the piece is hard to trace because it differs from the original. It doesn't appear to be stolen anymore because it's only a part of the whole piece.
The Padre in Giulianova was naturally worried that his sacred paintings would be butchered. The Carabinieri worked swiftly, but came up with very little at first. Then a vital witness turned up. A few days prior to the theft, a woman had gone to the church to pray when she noticed 2 conspicuous men. One of them had a heart with a rose tattooed on his arm. The men, she said, seemed to be casing the church and had asked strange questions. Padre Paolino urged the woman to go to the Carabinieri. The tattoo turned out to be the big lead. Musella knew exactly where to look.
It was a recognizable tattoo, and it reminded us of one of our regular customers. That's how I like to call the people who we deal with who have a record. When we traced the information, we actually discovered that this person had moved from Rome to the region of Giulianova a few months earlier.
The Carabinieri knew precisely who they were looking for, but they had no proof. So they devised a sting operation, codenamed Operation Bluff. They spread the news through the art world grapevine that they knew who the thieves were. It was designed to have 2 effects. First, the thieves would be certain to learn that they'd been identified. And second, it would make it impossible for them to find a buyer for their loot. The plan worked. The thieves soon contacted the Carabinieri and were prepared to cut a deal rather than cut the paintings. Musella agreed. The Carabinieri were given directions to an abandoned house 200 kilometers south of Rome, where the paintings were stashed.
We had spread the rumor that the items had already been sold, that they had been forced to sell them to prevent even worse disasters, like an arrest or a release in exchange for returning the goods.
The thieves, who were clearly not too concerned about the religious significance of the art, were arrested and served 6 months in prison. But most important, Padre Paolino and his parish had their paintings returned, and the Giulianova church went back to being a quiet seaside sanctuary on the Adriatic, only now one with an alarm system. The Carabinieri special unit had taken just a month to solve the case. Thanks to sufficient resources and a dedicated team of men, the Italian art squad knows the art world and its underworld very well. It's resulted in a number of spectacular recoveries, like the 2 Van Goghs stolen from the National Museum in Rome and Bellini's Madonna, recovered 27 years after its theft. The unit has the world's largest art database, with over 2 million descriptions of artworks and 250,000 photographs. Documenting art is essential for fighting art crime. That, of course, and catching criminals. Despite the fact that art crime has spread its tentacles internationally, most other countries don't give so much priority to combating it as the Italians, like Great Britain, which only has a small art investigation unit. Dick Ellis used to work for Scotland Yard, but now runs Trace, a private company that recovers stolen objects. He thinks stealing art involves more than just the art.
It's an international commodity, so you immediately have a commodity which to the criminal can be used either as a bartering chip, collateral, or moved very easily from one country to another and then be sold in a different legal jurisdiction, which creates problems for the investigator. It makes the recovery more difficult, introduces the ability of, if you like, for good faith purchasers to come in, and the whole thing becomes a mess.
If stolen art is basically a commodity, thieves logically go for the most valuable paintings. Big artists mean big money. So, which painters are the most popular targets? Here's a top 5 of most stolen artists based on information from the Art Loss Register in London. At number 5, it's French Impressionist Pierre-Auguste Renoir, with 209 paintings and drawings currently missing. In 4th place, Spanish Surrealist Salvador Dali, with 231 stolen works. At number 3 is the French-Russian painter Marc Chagall, who's had 309 paintings stolen. The Spanish surrealist Joan Miro comes in 2nd with 356 works. But stealing ahead, the absolute winner is Pablo Picasso with 551 works registered stolen. Picasso once said, "There's nothing worse than a brilliant beginning. Perhaps his paintings will find a brilliant ending, back where they belong." Or perhaps they won't. Remember, half of all stolen paintings are never recovered. In many countries, the theft of art is regarded as an ordinary crime. It's not given much priority. But sometimes cases are so big that the police are forced to respond. One of these cases, so big even the FBI was brought in, was the robbery of the Gardner Museum in Boston in 1990. 2 thieves entered the museum and got away with 11 paintings, including works by Vermeer, Degas and Rembrandt.
Well, it's hard to put a value on it because they are priceless, but conservatively it's between $300 and $500 million.
On March the 18th, 2 men in police uniforms and fake moustaches arrived at the Gardner Museum, telling the security that they were responding to a disturbance call. The gullible guards let them in and were immediately handcuffed and duct-taped. The thieves then spent a leisurely 81 minutes on a shopping spree. They ripped the valuable paintings out of their frames and left the security guards to be found the next morning.
This is a sketch of the 2 suspects that was based on the descriptions that were provided to us by the 2 security guards who were present at the museum on the night of the theft. There was a surveillance video tape the night of the theft, and the subjects broke into the security director's office and removed it. So our one possibility of seeing what these guys actually looked like, they took.
The FBI was soon on the case, but in 13 years it's become hopelessly tangled. After following literally thousands of leads, the Bureau haven't been able to get anywhere near the thieves or the stolen art. The first step in their investigation was checking out the usual suspects, many of whom enjoy the attention, like Miles Connor, America's most notorious and convicted art thief. Connor claims he masterminded the daring heist. Now that the statute of limitations for the case has expired, he's happy to say he would have taken part in the theft if he hadn't been otherwise engaged.
At the time of the theft of Gardner Museum, I was locked up. I was in a federal penitentiary at that time. And before that, what my involvement in that was, I had essentially planned the thing. And I'd planned to rob it myself and with my friends. And then, of course, I ended up getting locked up and sent away. So it was in the absence of myself that my friends did it. And they essentially pulled it off.
His 2 friends, Connor claims, were planning to use the paintings as a bargaining chip to get him out of jail. Unfortunately, things didn't go well for either of them. The first victim was David Horton.
And then he had a heart attack and died. Then my other close friend, David Donati, who was also involved, got killed. And he was murdered and found in the trunk of a car, beheaded.
Obviously, the untimely demise of the two main suspects was a setback for the FBI, making it virtually impossible for them to corroborate or to disprove Connor's story. They continued their investigation, which subsequently led agents round the world. Boston's large Irish community made an IRA connection seem plausible. In Dublin, agents investigated the laundering of stolen art for the purpose of fundraising, but no link to the Gardner case was ever established. The next stop was Tokyo, where the FBI had received information that an art collector with alleged ties to organised crime had been boasting that he owned Rembrandt's Sea of Galilee. When the FBI showed up with a search warrant and a curator from the Gardner, all they found was a bad copy. In the meantime, the museum took its own action, offering a substantial reward for information leading to the recovery of the paintings, whose empty frames still hang in the gallery.
Reward is now $5 million. It was $1 million when we began, and we raised it at the suggestion of the FBI. We've had some wonderful backers that have helped us to assemble this. The museum, however, in its reward statement says that the reward is for information leading to the recovery, and it also states that anyone who was a participant in the crime is not eligible, because we wouldn't be able to give a reward to someone who had perpetuated this crime.
This raises a central question in the battle against art crime. Which is more important, catching the thieves or simply getting the stolen paintings back, whatever the cost? At the FBI, Special Agent Jeffrey Kelly doesn't seem too concerned about where the information comes from, as long as it comes at all. Today, the FBI seems a bit desperate.
We will take information from anyone who wants to provide it, whether it's an upstanding citizen or someone who's a member of the criminal world. We don't differentiate in the information. We do use informants. It's an important part of our job. They have provided us with information that's invaluable because you can't get it sometimes from upstanding citizens. We can never cross the line, though. The information that we get has to be received lawfully, and we can't direct informants to commit crimes themselves in order to get it. But we're open to receiving this from anyone.
Enter William Youngworth III, an antique dealer with a criminal record who was following the scent of the $5 million reward. He tried to prove that he was in a position to recover the Gardner collection. Fancying a bit of limelight, Youngworth chose not to go to the police, but sought out a journalist. Tom Mashberg of the Boston Herald was the first person to talk to Youngworth about the paintings.
There were basically 3 occasions on which Youngworth was attempting to provide evidence to indicate that he had access to the art. One was when he provided photographs. One was when he provided paint chips. And one was when he arranged for me to view what appeared to be one of the stolen paintings, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt.
In the summer of 1997, Mashberg was approached by a number of people who offered to take him for a ride. He was driven to a disused warehouse where 2 other people took him inside to a storage locker. There, they showed him a rolled-up canvas.
It looked like it could easily be the Rembrandt. I'm not an art expert, so there's no way I could know for sure. But I took a very close look at it. I was not able to touch it. I was only able to look at it with a flashlight in a dark room. But I kept kind of a mental log of everything I saw. Subsequent to that, I was invited to the Gardner Museum, and they interrogated me for more than an hour and asked me detailed questions about what I saw. And in the end, they said, we can't rule it in, but we can't rule it out. It could be the real thing. If it's not, it's a very good forgery.
A game of poker ensued between Youngworth and the FBI. He wanted the $5 million, but soon produced a list of other demands, including immunity from prosecution. Frustrated, the feds arrested Youngworth on other charges. The goal, force him to talk about the whereabouts of the paintings. Youngworth kept his mouth shut and was sentenced to 3 years in jail. Another dead end in the FBI investigation. In the meantime, 13 years have passed since the robbery. The FBI still feel they'll find the paintings, though they're no longer too concerned with making arrests.
Yeah, well, that's nice of you to say. My focus is on recovering these paintings. I'm not concerned who recovers them or where they're recovered. I just want to see them coming back. so that I can move on to other things. So if they're recovered by a private individual or by the media or by another police agency, that's fine. I just want to see them returned to the Gardner Museum.
Reporter Tom Mashberg of the Boston Herald isn't entirely convinced the paintings will ever be recovered. He thinks the case has gone on too long.
I think the problem for the FBI is that the case has been sort of an orphan. It's gone from one agent to another. After September 11th, it was completely set aside. They didn't, probably for at least a year and a half, they didn't pay a lick of attention to it. You know, it's probably not as high on the priority chain as capturing 10 Most Wanted, stopping terrorism, things of that kind.
13 years after the crime, the Gardner Museum has nothing but empty frames to show, a poor substitute for the $300 million worth of art that's still missing. The police have other things on their minds. Art crime's clearly not a priority, so others, like Charles Hill, gladly fill the gap they've left.
I mean, it's just nonsensical to pretend that the police are the paramount investigative agency in matters of this kind, because they're simply not, and nor, in fact, are the insurers and their loss adjusters.
Hill, once a detective chief inspector at Scotland Yard, is now one of the world's leading private detectives hunting art thieves. In today's art market, specialised police forces dedicated to combating art crime still remain a rarity, which may explain why 50% of all stolen paintings are never recovered. Enter the private investigator, an important link in the world of art crime, individuals with their own methods for finding stolen art.
A private investigator must have a high level of integrity and be honest to his informants.
Ben Zoidemer is a private eye specialising in art crime. He operates in Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany. His spectacular recoveries include 118 Picassos in Avignon and a Bruegel and a Rubens in Newark. Zoidemer has one important motto: always work with the police.
It's a dangerous job, and there are great risks involved. But risks are a part of life, and we have to live with them.
A mystery writer with his own website and an understandable weakness for Porsches, Zoidemer has been dealing with art thieves for the last 40 years. He's known in the crime world as the Grey Rat. Zoidemer was a key figure in the arrest of two men in 2001 linked to the Turner case. In the summer of 1994, the Tate Gallery in London loaned two paintings by J.M.W. Turner to a German gallery for an exhibition. The paintings, two of his most significant works and insured for more than $30 million each, were stolen. The thieves were traced and arrested within a year, but the paintings weren't recovered. 6 years later, Ben Zoidemer received a letter in German asking him to mediate in the return of the paintings, but he was warned.
The first thing they said was, "Mr. Zoidemer, we know where you live, and if you get the police involved, you're a dead man."
The Germans said they could get hold of the Turners. They wanted Zoidemer to negotiate the sale of the paintings to Lloyd's insurers for $5 million. After seeing photographs of the paintings together with a recent newspaper, Zoidemer agreed to meet the men at an Antwerp cafe.
I met them 14 times, in 14 different places. And from the beginning, I informed the police in Amsterdam and Antwerp. So the conversation goes like this. You try to get an impression of each other. They want something from me. They have demands. No police. They tell me what it is they want to sell. They also say that what they have is unsellable to others because the paintings are so famous. So the story they told me was a well-known story. I'd heard it many times before in the 30 or 35 years before that from other art thieves.
Despite the criminal's explicit demands, Zoidemer immediately informed the Belgian police. He insists it's the only way he works.
I always collaborate with the police, because I believe stolen art should be returned together with the perpetrators. Otherwise, the case becomes dubious.
He helped the police set up a sting. A meeting was arranged with the criminals for the sale of the paintings. Zoidemer told them that a buyer would be in Antwerp ready to pay cash, provided they could check the canvases first. The police were nearby, set to pounce on the criminals the moment the paintings came into sight.
We sat in a cafe and we discussed the details of the transfer. I said to them, I will now go with you to the truck and we'll take a look at the paintings. Then I'll tell the buyer, who didn't exist, that I've seen them. Then I'll go and get you the money, and the 10 million is including the vehicle, and they agreed. And from that moment, the police followed us, which of course the thieves didn't know.
This is footage of the actual sting operation filmed by a camera crew that had been tipped off. Zuidemer, he's the one with the white cap, walked with the crooks from the cafe towards the van where they said they'd stashed the paintings.
We agreed that once I was inside the truck and had seen the paintings, I would give a signal and then the police would step in.
Cue a spectacular raid with the police arresting the crooks and Zuidemer trying to keep the paintings from being damaged. Unfortunately, in the end, the priceless Turners turned out to be something else.
I was disappointed after the criminals were arrested to discover that the paintings were false. We'd assumed that they were real. On the other hand, we were glad that we were able to arrest two people who had tried to rip Lloyd's London off for 10 million.
Zuidemer hadn't retrieved the art, but he had helped catch a gang specialised in passing on forgeries for ransom money. 1 year after Zuidemer's surprise sting, the real Turners turned up. Other intermediates and informants were paid millions by the Tate Gallery for their return, money the Tate had collected from the insurance company. It's said that by being smart, in the end the Tate even made money from the transaction. Also in London, another private eye with a different approach has made a name for himself in the art world. Charles Hill is a former Detective Chief Inspector at New Scotland Yard. His star rose when he retrieved Edvard Munch's Scream, worth $70 million, in 1994. Hill now makes a living doing what an overworked and understaffed police force don't seem able to do: find stolen artworks.
To be a good private detective, you have to be straight with people. Now, that means you have to put your cards on the table. But to be really good, you have to be able to keep some of the cards face down and still play the game. And that's the way I operate. Generally speaking, police officers want to catch criminals. I did that myself as a police officer. And the property is a secondary matter. I came to the conclusion when I was a police officer that some items of property are more important than the people who steal them. And that would include the recovery of the Scream, the recovery of the Vermeer's lady writing a letter with her maid, and most recently the recovery of the Titian.
Like most private investigators, Hill couldn't do his job as well as he does without the help of informants. These informants are people with connections to the crime world. They frequently have a criminal background themselves. So how do you know if you can rely on them?
You have to trust your judgment and instincts and what you learn from the person and from what checks you can do about them. And I can make what amounts to a character judgment or valuation, and where I know that this person is either on the level and worth talking to, even though he may have a criminal record, and maybe some kind of thief himself. But unless you deal with people like this, you're not going to get these things back.
Hill's most recent triumph has been retrieving a painting by Titian, valued at $9 million. This 16th century painting was stolen in 1995 from the state drawing room of the Marquis of Bath's estate in Wiltshire. At the time, Hill worked together with Mark Dalrymple.
Hello, Mark. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Good.
Dalrymple is a fine art loss adjuster. He took out an ad offering a £100,000 reward for information leading to the painting's recovery.
We had many reactions from different types of people. Some would ring up and not give a name, would threaten us. We had several calls from people who said, we know where it is, pay us £100,000, and then we will tell you where it is.
Of course, it's possible that paying a reward would encourage people to think, well, this is a good way to make a living. But I think as long as you take it case by case and you're not paying the same people the same sorts of rewards constantly, I think you can keep things very separate.
The men spent 7 years working on the case, with no success, until one day when Hill was contacted by a man who called himself Ben.
he came up straight away and said, would I be interested in recovering the Titian from Longleat? To which I replied, is the Pope a Catholic?
The two men met at this cafe. The conversation was encouraging. The man calling himself Ben had information which seemed to link him to the stolen Titian. Hill realised he might be very close to solving the case. But a good detective takes nothing and no one at face value, so Hill decided to prepare himself thoroughly for the transfer of the painting with a crash course in Titian.
I came here to the National Gallery and looked at several of his pictures to make sure that I knew what was a Titian and what wasn't. It's easily done. You just stare at it for long enough and look at it and think about it and you remember it and then compare it with what you're seeing.
The day after Hill's visit to the National Gallery, Ben came to his office and suggested they go for a drive.
So whenever I get in a car with somebody, I've either cautiously evaluated the dangers to myself and decided I either do something or I don't. And generally speaking, I'll do something. But I have the confidence in myself and a sense of survival so that, no, touch wood, I haven't come a cropper yet, and that includes being tied up and guns held to my head and things like that. I don't have the same fears as a lot of other people. We're going up to the roundabout where old Ben told me to go around this roundabout twice. So I went around it twice for him. Well, he looked to see if anybody was behind us. Around we went. Very scenic. And then he said, go left down here. I said, sure.
Finally, Hill and his informant arrived at the place where the $9 million painting was supposed to be.
So Ben said, old Ben said, pull in here. I said, fine. And I pulled into where this car is backing up now. And he said to me, there it is. And I looked to my right, and that's where it was. And there was an old man next to it. I got back in with the bag. I tore open a corner, and there was St. Joseph's head. And I said to him, well, this is just as Titian painted it, so I guess the rest of it is as well.
The painting was returned to the Marquis of Bath. And Hill got his reward, which, of course, he shared with his informant.
In my experience to date, which is a year after the Titian was recovered, I am confident that none of the money paid as a reward went to the family who stole the picture. I'm sure of that. I'm fairly confident that none of the money went to the family that held the picture for some time after the theft. And I'm fully confident that the particular individual to whom it was given, so I understand, has received no financial benefit from it at all.
Everybody's happy. The painting's been returned to its rightful owner and legitimate people have earned money doing it. But not happy at all with this way of operating is private detective Ben Zoidemer.
Private detectives who work in a different way, who return the goods without the thief, are criminals themselves in my eyes. And lawyers who are involved in buying stolen art back without the offenders are also criminals. It's like enticing people to commit a crime.
If you fancy recovering some paintings and want to make some money doing it, here's a top 5 of the highest rewards on offer for paintings still missing today. At number 5, with a $125,000 reward, is a collection of works stolen in Sweden in 2002. The most valuable piece among them is Jan Bruegel's View from a Lost. At number 4, Leonardo da Vinci's Madonna with Infant holding a yarn winder, taken from Drumlanrig Castle in the UK in 2003. Officially, the reward's substantial, but it's said to be at least $150,000. At number 3, Lucien Freud's painting of Francis Bacon with a $170,000 reward. The painting was stolen in Germany in 1988. Freud designed special wanted posters all over Berlin in order to retrieve the painting. Second is a $615,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of Pablo Picasso's Portrait of Dora Maar, stolen in 1999 from a Saudi yacht on the French Riviera. But the highest reward by far is the $5 million offered for any bona fide information about the 13 pieces of art that were stolen from the Gardner Museum in Boston. As we've seen, the FBI couldn't solve the case, but maybe you can. Stolen art is rarely recovered by accident. To get it back, you often have to enter the criminal world. Easier said than done. The main route's via informants. For detectives like Charles Hill and Ben Zuidemer, working with such people is a daily occurrence with strict rules.
But I'm happy to speak quietly.
The first step's usually when an informant contacts a detective with a lead. Despite the huge rewards often involved, negotiating with such people is a tricky business. How do Ben Zuidemer and Charles Hill deal with their informants? Everything stems from trust, a dubious commodity in this twilight world. Detectives by nature and by experience are always on their guard.
I've never seen you before. How do I know you're a genuine, honest person?
Invariably, everybody lies to you in the end, but to differing degrees and for different motivations and reasons. And you just have to accept that as part of life. So I accept it as part of life. You can sit here and tell me every whopping story you want to in the world. But, for the time being, I'll accept what you have to say is true.
Because I've been a detective for 40 years, I'm pathologically paranoid and lonely. I don't trust you for a moment.
Step 1, trust no one. Step 2, get them to trust you. The informant needs to feel you're someone they can count on. So how does Hill start building up a relationship?
Above all else in art crime, you have to capture people's imaginations and at the same time make them confident that you're the right person to deal with the problem.
Step 3, try to set up a face-to-face meeting as soon as possible.
I want to meet you and find out what your motives are. Why are you telling me that? The motive could be revenge towards accomplices. If the motive is good, it could be money. After meeting your informant, the 4th step is take everything they've told you and
double check to make sure that what you're being told is true. You have to double check that, because what you're being told may only be half a truth, and they're holding back something for some reason. You've got to try and ferret out as much information as you possibly can.
On to step 5. Once you've established mutual faith and are fairly certain you're dealing with the right people, financial negotiations can begin.
You say to people at first, I'll help you with the problem, and they'll raise the money issue.
They will raise the money issue.
Bound to, yeah.
Haggling over money may seem vital, but in practice it's just as important to guarantee anonymity.
I assume that you want to make money. To me, information is important, something I can work with. I'll give the information to the police, and if they ask me how I got that information, I will in the first place protect my informant.
It's very important that you convey to them that you can help them without getting them arrested by getting the pictures back, and they will make some money out of it, although not a lot.
When dealing with an informant, it's also crucial the person's not criminally involved with the case at hand.
He can't have any part in the crime, not a single bit. Only then will he have a right to half the money of what I get.
Working with informants can lead to successful recovery of art. But since informants and detectives have to make a living, the money made from dealing in stolen art has to be significant. So any budding detective should remember to make sure that the victim or his insurance company is willing to pay the promised reward.
I would never get personally involved in anything in which, I wasn't going to make some sort of reasonable fee. I'm not particularly greedy, but I do need to earn a living. So if I were going to spend time on anything and then say to them, now, what exactly do you have in mind about what you want to do with this, and what are you prepared to pay?
Money makes the world go round, but not every piece of art is worth millions. There's a limit to what private investigators can and will do. So where can ordinary art collectors go if their paintings are stolen?
Het is niet niks hoor, je fabriek moeten sluiten. Nu zitten mijn mensen opeens thuis. Het laat me niet los. Hoe is het nou met Van den Broek?
It's a growing international problem. Churches and private homes are soft targets. Only half of all stolen paintings are ever recovered. Despite the fact that it's the third most profitable illegal activity in the world, most police forces don't see art theft as a priority. So the art world has to police itself. Where do you turn to when your irreplaceable family heirloom is stolen? Does anyone care about the portrait you inherited? One man in London does, and is fighting his own crusade against art thieves, backed by insurance companies and auction houses. His method is simple. Make sure that all stolen art, big or small, is registered in a database to prevent it from being sold elsewhere. To date, the Art Loss Register has compiled a list of 150,000 stolen artefacts worldwide. It was started by Julian Radcliffe.
If I can compare it to motor vehicles, 70% of all stolen motor vehicles are recovered. Why is that? The answer is that they all have a registration number, and there is a very good central database. The problem with art is that we do not get all the losses logged with us. So our database is not complete. That's the first problem. The second problem is that not all transactions in the art world are checked with us, either for reasons of economics, they don't wish to pay, or because they know that some of the items they're selling are dubious.
Radcliffe may look more Clark Kent than Superman, but he's single-handedly saved the art world time and time again, rescuing countless works of art, some valuable, some not so valuable.
Hello, Mr. Baden. It's Julian Radcliffe from the Art Loss Register in London. We have the Clichy paperweight now in the office here, and the insurance company would be happy for you to purchase it off them, since of course legally they're now the owners of it, having paid the claim, for £1,000, which is the mid-price which was put.
Since the register's launch in 1991, Radcliffe has recovered over $100 million worth of stolen art, a truly phenomenal success rate. He's achieved this by building a database of all stolen art which can be easily consulted by any auction house, dealer or buyer. He also uses his knowledge and skills to scrutinise works up for sale in the large auction houses.
The auction houses sometimes call us if they're suspicious about a painting. So if a painting in this catalogue was offered to them and they didn't believe the story of the person who was giving it to them, then they would ring us up and ask us to check it before they put it in the catalogue. And the other day, the major auction house called us about some clocks which they were suspicious of, and it turned out that all 3 clocks being offered by this individual from the continent were stolen and were probably worth about £100,000.
Radcliffe's often had to conduct hardcore negotiations with hardcore criminals. Today he's managed to recover a bag full of stolen articles from a gang who repeatedly robbed a book dealer.
These items were stolen in 2 thefts from a book dealer in the West End of London. They managed to get into his office by going across a roof, and they stole about £300,000 worth of books, including some which I have here, which I'll show you, and this helmet and this painting of Beirut. Now this is quite an interesting theft, because the books that were stolen, some turned up in America at an auction, some turned up at Bonham's, the British auction house, and the people who put them for sale in Bonham's, the police interviewed, but couldn't find enough evidence to do anything about it. And so later, these 2 individuals who'd sold the books at Bonham's went to the book dealer and offered him some more of his books back. And at that stage, we were brought in, and we agreed with the police that we would negotiate for the return of this material and keep the police informed, try and find out more about the theft, and that's what we've been doing.
Julian Radcliffe is convinced that in the end his database will prevail. A quick check of whether an object is listed as stolen simply makes the tracing of illegal art a good deal easier.
There is no doubt that if everybody logs their losses and the trade searches, then the recovery rate will rise from, say, 3% or whatever it is at the moment to eventually 40 or 50%.
More efforts are needed if the police are going to beat the thieves in their $10 billion industry. But, says Dick Ellis, that's not their priority.
There aren't enough police officers to investigate these crimes. There are not enough police officers with sufficient expertise.
Art crime is easy money, with tentacles spreading to every other area of crime.
If you can curtail art crime, then you are denying the criminals a source of revenue with which they will then just use it in other areas of crime and create more problems for society as a whole.
Until police start taking art crime seriously, it will remain big business. And Picasso, Rembrandt and Renoir will continue to grab headlines as they get grabbed again.